Welcome, everyone, to Skills Connect. This is our podcast where we have conversations with the most bold and most responsible leaders in the world. I'm Siobhan Savage. I'm the CEO and also co-founder of Reejig. Today, I'm joined by the incredible Amy Wilson. Amy is an expert in all things product strategy, and I'm lucky to call her one of my own advisors at Reejig. She's a visionary SaaS executive with a career that spans some of the most transformational moments in enterprise tech. Amy has led the global teams across SAP SuccessFactors and Workday, and scaling complex businesses and championing thought leadership and innovation and talent, workforce strategy, all the things we love to talk about in terms of human capital and management. She's known for her ability to spot unmet needs, turn bold ideas into strategy, and to rally teams to deliver with heart and purpose. And I can tell you firsthand that she has had a massive impact with us in very, very, very short space of time. So welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much, Siobhan. That was quite the introduction.
You didn't pay me for that. I
I'm
just don't
blushing.
worry. So, Amy, you have led product strategy for SAP, for Workday, and now you're advising Reejig. From that advantage point where you have worked with some of the most transformational technology companies of essentially HR, work tech, I would call it more enterprise tech because I think we talk about Workday and SAP and SuccessFactors as HR tech. They're not. These are transformational enterprise systems that the whole businesses and enterprises of the world are built on. And now you're helping us build into what will be a once in a generation change to work and a product. What do you think enterprise HR tech has consistently got wrong about workforce intelligence? So, like, how do you feel about that move that we're making?
Yeah, I think that the term work intelligence and to some degree workforce intelligence is a bit new. So I'd kind of like to step back and talk a little bit about workforce planning, which has been this really tough nut to crack in the enterprise space for decades, to be quite
Mm-hmm.
honest. Um, and the main reason for that is that there's been incomplete data, right? So companies have wanted to be able to predict the future, so that their people and their businesses can thrive. But how the heck do you do that, right? I mean, especially if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have all the data. And what we've seen in the past is that there's been an attempt to boil the ocean. So just so many assumptions, so many variables. It's quite frankly overwhelming. And as a result, a lot of companies, a lot of leaders have just kind of fallen back into just doing headcount planning,
Mm-hmm.
just very operational workforce planning, and then putting strategic workforce planning to the side and doing a lot of like hand wringing over that, right? And so, this has been like that tough nut to crack. And to be honest, the skills push that we have seen over the last years has actually brought a lot of clarity to solving the problem because at least it has narrowed the focus. Finally, leaders have been able to like specifically say, hey, we're going to have a different need for skills in the future. There is going to be a skills gap. There is a skills gap. So how do we solve for that? And the narrowing down of that problem really has allowed a focused sense of innovation and exploration in the industry, that has been really quite remarkable. And so
Mm.
now a lot of companies at least have an idea of where their skill gaps are. And that's super helpful, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's focused, as you said, I love the point that you made. Like it was all about headcount versus actually strategic, workforce allocation, workforce strategy, like that whole part was quite separate. And I think to your point, like it's not because folks weren't trying, it was because the
Right.
data was the problem, right? And
Yeah.
I always hear folks complaining about their systems and complaining about, this is clunky or this doesn't work or it's not amazing. But actually, if you look closely, most of the time the problem is data. That the systems are not being given the data they require to do the thing that they need to do. And I think that's the part where over the last, couple of years, we've been very focused on like, let's solve for that problem, which is the data problem. And, the crazy thing that I found out at the early part of Reejig was like, no one knows what anyone's doing. Like
Yeah, yeah,
literally, like no
absolutely.
one, the best
Right.
companies in the world have no idea what their people are doing.
Yeah.
And the framework of how we've designed workforce planning is exactly what you said, based on like headcount, and based on job
hmm
titles and people, but that's
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
not workforce
Yeah,
planning. That's
for
not
sure.
at all that.
Yeah.
And I think that
That's
that's
counting heads and money, and that's it. And so it has no relation to what the company actually needs to do to equip themselves for the future.
yeah,
And so, so the skills focus has really been great. And I have a confession to make, which is that honestly, I thought it was the panacea. I thought that was the end game,
yeah.
up
So did
until
I.
recently, and you schooled me, Siobhan, that but it was a huge step forward. It really
Yeah.
was, but it's not predictive of the future, right?
Mm-mm.
Because if you're looking at what's trending now in job postings, in resumes, then the best you can do is predict next month.
Yeah.
Um, but more likely, you're predicting like a couple years ago,
Yeah.
right?
I think for context for listeners as well, the only reason that Amy and I have had this kind of epiphany moment is because we made all the mistakes ourselves. Like I
Yeah.
spent $40 million
Yep.
building skill-centric technology, right? How much money did you spend? We all did the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
at that time, that was the moment, that was what was available, that was what was possible. And the only reason that you and I had such a like deep moment of like, huh, was because I had like literally learned so many things on the way to getting to this moment. Like this wasn't I woke up one day and decided that I'm going to move towards tasks and work. Like this was a consistent, repeatable thing that I was seeing across our customer base, where people had skills, absolutely, but the jobs and the work and the architecture in which the company that was being built on was just like, for me, built in the dinosaurs, and it wasn't actually relevant for the world that I was in. And I found exactly the same thing that you said about the data. Like that was the problem. So I think by the time I'd got to you, I had done about 10
Yeah.
laps around this problem. And I was sure, like I was
And
literally
you're like,
sure.
come on, join me.
I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Why is no one seeing this? But yeah, I
Right.
mean, I
Yeah.
think, and you recently wrote a piece, which I love, so it was like the shift of talent intelligence to work intelligence. And it's essentially, and I'll link it here, folks, for you to have a read, but it was where you argue that skills data alone isn't enough. What's the most common misunderstanding what's the most common misunderstanding you see between skill focused tools and true, I mean, think about the way Reejig's doing it from a true work intelligence, and how should leaders rethink their investment, especially now? Like look at the market that we're in. Like it is potentially recessionary again. We're
Mhm.
back into this like everyone is freaking out again mode. It feels like that kind of pre-COVID moment where people and businesses, like if you're in any form of like Nike or selling physical products and you've got offshored development, you are in serious trouble. Like
Yeah.
that, like so all of these businesses that are like going from like they're already having a tough time. Talent intelligence and work intelligence are two very different things for businesses when they're in this moment, right? So
Yeah.
how would you
Mhm.
advise leaders on, the difference between the two?
Well, so what I was starting to say before was that, the whole point is to predict what do you need to do in the future, right? And so if you're just looking at what skills are currently trending, then that's going to give you a picture of the past and not the future. And in order to start to predict the future, you really need to get at the root problem, and the root problem is not skills. That
Mm,
is a symptom of the problem, right? The fact that we won't have the skills that we need to do the work in the future. There's that word, work, right? So the
yeah.
root problem is understanding the work. It's understanding who's doing the work, what the work is, what actually needs to get done in order for the business to thrive. And if you
Hmm.
don't look at that first and you're just looking at skills in isolation, then you're trying to like beat beat out the symptom instead of
Yeah.
really going to the foundation. And
Yeah.
again, I'm telling you this, but this is the revelation that I have had based on what you have shared with me with all of your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. And what was really interesting, like the market has such a deep kind of impact. So kind of like when we started thinking about work, we started thinking about work more as a solution to solve the talent intelligence problem, if I'm really honest, right? So this was
Yeah,
pre-ChatGPT and the large language models. This was, why are the job matches not great? Well, the ultimate thing we realized was that people have skills, work doesn't have skills, and jobs don't have skills. Tasks, they have tasks, and you require skills, right? What ended up happening very soon after we built the work ontologies was then the market started to change, and the large language models and ChatGPT became like every CEO was on the radar.
right,
And suddenly we realized that another thing that we were getting wrong was that in the talent intelligence side of things, you're looking at jobs and impact to jobs based on skills. And AI doesn't automate skills. AI automates the task. And
right.
that was another thing where it was like, hold on a moment, I've got this one wrong too, because we spent money on building like a model that could
Right.
predict skills impacts, right? So then that happened. And then now we're in a market where, especially I've noticed this in the US since I've moved over, there is like a lot of operational efficiency, cost
Mhm.
optimization,
Yeah.
productivity. Like it's very intense over here in terms of like the worker like expectations around work. It's very different from APAC, right? There is definitely a
Yeah.
different vibe between like how work happens over here. But that actually signals that what we've seen with these customers is that actually it's not that they don't care about their people, they absolutely do, but they don't really care about career pathing and things like that in a market where the CEO is trying to keep the business above water, and that
Exactly.
that they're
Mhm.
in this different place. And what's become really valuable and why we've been growing so fast, as you know, is because we're actually diagnosing the problem exactly the way you said it. We're not looking at the symptom, we're looking at the root cause of what's going on. And can we tell you and predict your future based on where you want to take it? And what will be the symptom of that based on your workforce impact? And then how do we think about evolving your workforce? So that was really
Yeah.
where we have noticed this big kind of shift to more the work intelligence is also not HR. That's the
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember when we did this product strategy session
Although it
in New
matters to
York?
HR. It matters to
Absolutely.
HR tremendously. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it becomes a full business. And the other thing that we noticed was that skills are kind of like the HR folks' language for describing work. But if you talk to a business leader, they don't really talk about skills. They talk about the things that they need done. And sure, there is the skills that are required to do
Yeah.
those things, but it's not the natural language, nor is the job architecture. And I've been like coming hard after the job architecture for the last 18 months, because when you go into companies and you see how limited they are in terms of understanding the structure of work and jobs, like that has been where I think there'll be this big change when it
Yeah.
comes to real AI. And if you think about people deploying agents, that job architecture becomes kind of pointless in a world where we're taking
Mhm.
out tasks like Jenga, right? That whole idea that we'll take some out, we'll put some on. Like that's kind of what's going to be happening. So I think your article around that move and that bringing folks on the journey from, talent intelligence to work intelligence, I think becomes really important, especially today in this world.
Right. Yeah. I think that, what's been interesting is that the advent of AI being such an important part of the work operating system, so to speak, has really illuminated what the root cause of the problem is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we would have, if this hadn't happened in the last year and a half or so, maybe we would have just continued on that isolated skills journey for a
Mm-hmm.
while and thought like, okay, well, we're making progress and so on. But now all of a sudden, there's like it just doesn't matter because
Mm-hmm.
there's such huge change. There's such uh, tremendous opportunity and then also drawbacks in terms of the way we're working and the impact to the workforce. So
Yeah.
to continue to build the skills that are trending isn't going to help the workforce at all
Mm-hmm.
if AI is taking away all of the tasks and the work that people are doing with those skills, right? So we need to
Yeah.
get a lot more strategic and have a much better understanding of what is the work that humans are going to be doing and what is the work that AI is going to be doing, and then build out those talent strategies, those talent programs based on what actually is going to be needed in the future. And
Yeah.
that's amazing that we have that data now to be able to do that, because
Yeah.
that is a gift to our workers and to our businesses to be able to thrive in the future.
Yeah. The other thing as well, like a lot of the kind of skills projects that had this whole excitement, but then kind of sizzled out a little bit. Like I've seen a lot of folks kind of stepping back a little bit. And I think a lot of again, comes back down to the quality of data. Like if you're inferring skills off a job advert and the job advert is crap, like rubbish in, rubbish out, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
like, and that was the thing when we started, like the data we were getting was terrible. And then we were trying to infer skills and like we would have the most randomest like things that would come out because it was pulling random stuff out of the marketing part of it. Like, and like I built AI, right? So I can say this openly, it's not a magician. Like it literally needs to know like what are the skills. So that was a big problem as well, that a lot of the skills products also were pulling in not great data. Therefore, as a user, I'm not going to trust it. So that was like another problem. And then the other problem, which is what we spent time talking about you when you were in your last role, was like this harmonization. If everyone is using different skills languages, from hiring, from moving, from mobilizing to resource allocation to learning, it becomes like honestly a shit show. Like there's just so much like confusion. And that was kind of the whole emphasis of why you guys went down that road around harmonization, the governance layer, because governance became a very important topic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's where I think customers are like kind of stuck right now. They're like, oh, but like our learning team have bought this, and recruitment are doing this, and it's like I truly believe that actually none of this should be skills. This should be one common language of work. So think about your organization needs an infrastructure for it to operate. Reejig becomes the critical infrastructure that is enabling your work to worker orchestration. Mm-hmm. So that is made up of a work architecture, which is the kind of compliance part that we need to have, because we know sort of some level of hierarchy for, mm-hmm. Unions, EA agreements, etc., that we need to know, some level of REM. We need to know what that looks like. But then we've got the ontology, which is then essentially what is people doing? What are all the tasks, right, the subtasks, the skills? And I think that becomes sort of the critical infrastructure, which skills are then being connected to. So we can basically see, well, what are the skills that are required to do this work, rather than like us pumping in data that is like job adverts, position descriptions, and pulling out like the skills. That becomes the inference layer and the enrichment layer of like actually what's happening. And then you should be feeding that in and out of all of the systems, or feeding it into like an SAP or a Workday or one of those systems. Mm-hmm. That was kind of what you and I had started really talking about when we first met as well.
Right, right. Yeah. And you know what also is really interesting is in parallel to kind of the skills revolution that's been happening in the industry over the last few years has been the advent of agile teams and side gigs. So even inside enterprises, right? So, we're here, gig economy, but even inside a company. And so I think that this influx of focus on agile teams and side gigs was another omen of what was to come, right? Because mm-hmm. we need to get much more agile in terms of how we think about jobs and work and orgs and people. Because frankly, our rigid structures do not work at all in the midst of change. And so mm-hmm. what we've been seeing over the last 5 years or so is companies bolting on side systems to try and get any sort of visibility or make any sort of sense of what sort of work is actually happening with these side gigs and agile teams. But frankly, it's needs to be part of the core system, right? It's foundational, because otherwise we are lacking visibility, and that there's lacking visibility of what people are doing and accomplishing. Incentives are screwed up in terms of, like you're reporting to somebody who cares about something completely different than what you're actually working on. And,
Yep.
so it's just a jumble. And this means that, the org chart, the job architecture, these no longer reflect what's actually
No.
happening. So we need to blow it up, Siobhan.
Yep. Yes. I mean, I was so polite about it for like the whole year because we've built out we've built out the work architecture, we've built out the work ontology, we have all of this in the work operating system. We've had that for the last 2 years, and we've been really evolving all the work intelligence. And I think I've been really polite about the job architecture, but I've kind of given up now because I'm like, I have not seen, and you know what I'm like, I am deep in trenches with customers. I'm not sitting on the sidelines.
Yep.
I learn best when I'm beside a customer with my sleeves rolled up, trying to figure out how to solve it, right? Because we're never going to figure this out if I'm sitting with a product team, just like them feeding back. Like I've learned that lesson before. The only way that I can figure out how to do this is like, I got to have empathy for it. I got to know it. I have not seen in one company yet, and I'm talking the biggest companies in the world, not one yet, that the job architecture, like the consultants come in, they spend a whole pile of money on this thing. By the time they finish the project, it goes out of date. No one actually knows what to do with it. Everyone's allowed to do whatever they want within systems. There is no like connection point in any way, shape, or form to actual work. That's just a labeling of work by HR folks. So like I think the blowing it up is like I actually completely agree. Like everyone can go after this job architecture thing. I'm not doing that. I'm building a work architecture. Like that's what we're doing. Like, and I think that becomes the critical infrastructure for building the AI powered workforce. Because you can put ChatGPT bots in front of any crap data and it's still crap data, right? Like so, I think that's where it becomes really interesting. One of the other things that I find really interesting, right? So we're in this like, I think 2025 year of agent, but we're in this kind of like piloty, beta testy type world where customers have not scaled across agents. Now I can see the potential of the agents across major enterprise for sure. And we're not even into full autonomous yet. But what I do see is this problem where you can build it and they don't come. You know what I mean? Like, and I think one of the things that, you've built platforms that have been used by hundreds of millions of people. We're talking, I can't even imagine how many people your software has touched over your career because you're not only looking at the business leads, but you're also in the hands of your employees too, right? So when you're looking at that, how do you design for change in that level of like skill when AI is reshaping work? Like how do you think, because that's going to be the thing that's going to trip us all up. Like we can roll out all these tools, but if people are not adopting, then the AI thing kind of feels like it's not going to work a little bit for me. Like I'm a little bit concerned about that. What have you seen work? What have you guys been part of before?
Well, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, which is my greatest hope of what we're going to see out of HR tech in the coming years. And that is for a company, and it could be a startup, it could be an existing large company, but they actually build an HR system of record that supports at its core a more agile way to organize people and work. And not as a side hustle, not as something that happens over here, but that it's at its foundation. Because honestly, like as we've been talking to customers about work intelligence and the work ontology and the work architecture, we can do so much for companies now, but we still have to pump that information into an old rigid structure, right? So we can help organizations redesign and re-engineer their processes and their roles and like we can do all of that. But as long as these changes are being pushed into rigid existing structures, there is a limitation in terms of what an organization can accomplish and what the relevance, quite frankly, of that HR system of record, right? That HR system of record isn't reflecting the modern way of
Yeah.
working and what the company needs to do. So so I think it's out there. I think it's going to happen. It's not there yet, but that's really what I think needs to happen.
Well, you see platforms like Ripple and Deal that are all built for the sort of small to medium-sized businesses, right? That
Mhm.
are built with AI first and built fully connected from day one. Like they're not like bolted on modules. They're actually like
Yep.
one system that is like designed for. So like it'll be really interesting to see where product goes,
Well, I
even like
know
with the
they're built
Workdays.
AI first, but I don't know if they're built agile work first, right?
Mm. Yeah,
So,
no, the truth, they're actually people first. They're people and numbers. Like you're
yeah.
right. They actually are. That's actually very, very
Mhm.
true. And I think that's where I think the whole space is going to change because I think that like right now we're in this period of like the pre crazy where it's like we're kind of I feel like the calm before the storm of like I'm now seeing across all these customers that they're all in kind of phase one is how I would describe it, which is like they're all testing and they're all like starting to
Mhm.
deploy AI and they're using us to figure out what's the best way to do this and how to reinvent, right? But very quickly, once agents turn full autonomous and you actually have mature enough technology, like, can you imagine what's going to happen then? How fast this is going to change? I think it really will only kick in 2026 that we'll start to
Mhm.
see that true
Yep.
level of like agent operating inside of environment. And I think that's where it becomes your whole work operating model has to completely change. Like right
Yep.
now, we're kind of half in the old world, trying to put our one foot in the
Right.
new world, and we're seeing that with customers, which is why we kind of hesitated to blow up the job architecture because we didn't want to hurt their feelings and just tell them like sometimes you can from a product strategy and vision, you know this more than anything, you can get really vision focused, but some people are not, most of the population are not there where
Absolutely.
you are, and you can
Yep.
actually isolate them without bringing them on the journey. So I feel like that's what you're saying is actually really fair because it just becomes an orchestrator, like it's that
Mhm.
whole continuous work to worker, and the worker could be an agent or it could be one of your flex folks or it could be one of your employees, right?
Yeah, I think it's really good advice to meet people and organizations and leaders where they are. But what's interesting is how quickly where they are is changing, right? So the the AI automation and AI workers that are, coming into the forefold right now are really just illuminating these problems that have been building over the
Mm-hmm.
past decade.
Yeah.
But like right now, or organizations and leaders just don't have a choice but to redesign, right? They're
Yeah.
getting pressure from the board, they're getting pressure from like everywhere, right? The government, I don't, to
Yeah, it's everywhere.
to come up with more efficiencies, to come up with more velocity, and they have to redesign. And so again, we can do so much with what we have, but we need, some foundations to change as well, I think. And the other thing too is to recognize is that it's it's not this like one-time thing, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is it's not just that like, oh, AI is here and we need a quick project to figure out like what we're going to do with AI, and then next year everything goes back to the same, right? Like
Yeah.
that is not what we're talking about. We are talking about just increase in change, increase in agility, increase in a focus on what work is to be done, jobs to be done, et cetera. And so that's why I feel like we really need to blow up how we think about work and jobs
Mm-hmm.
in general. And it's something that's going to sustain for the long term, not just, a like this year project.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the AI potential of the job is like the tiniest part of the puzzle because
Yeah.
actually the magic is the re-engineering. How do you like
Mhm.
the Jenga blocks? What are you taking out? What are you adding in? Like there's this
Yeah.
rebuilding that's going to happen. And you know what's really funny? Because I keep talking about Jenga blocks, I keep seeing them everywhere. Like these massive New York has all these random massive Jenga blocks in the city. It's like all the
Oh,
buildings, like everywhere I
you
go. So
have
it
to
must be the
stop and play
universe.
every time?
I'm well more I'm just like, oh, it's the universe telling me I'm on the right path. It's funny. So you're not just product leader, right? You are also an early investor or sorry, you're an investor in early stage companies. What can enterprises and enterprise leaders learn from how startups approach workforce design, speed, and innovation? So if you look at the way I build this company versus like a big company, like what do you reckon is like, what do you see as the difference?
Well, startups and starting a company AI first, or really anything first, right, is always going to be an advantage because 100% of the people are bought in, or at least close to 100%,
Yeah.
or they're peer pressured in or something to the methods and the practices that have been incepted. But honestly, this advantage doesn't last that long because there's always something new, right? There's always a new technology, there's always something. And so the key is to create a culture that can sustainably adapt and learn, and moves together, right? So it's really about that kind of culture. And the bigger you get, the harder this gets. So the competitive advantage isn't going to be about any particular tech, but instead those startups. So it's not all startups, but those startups that set up that culture of curiosity, learning, and change from the get-go. And honestly, like that is what I've seen from Reejig, being, up close and personal, and, with some of the other startups that I worked with, but certainly not all. I mean, a lot of startups are just kind of banking on like, okay, some cool new tech, and now we're going to be great. But that's not
Mm-hmm.
how you build a competitive moat. You build a
Yeah.
competitive moat by building a team that is going to be able to pivot. Like, so for example, Reejig was all in on talent intelligence, and the team, because of the way that you built it and the way that you operate, you were able to pivot to work intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Recognizing that this is the way of the future. This
Mm-hmm.
is how we're really going to be able to crack this nut, and everyone's on board, right? It's
Yep.
it's
Well, to an extent,
yeah,
like
yeah.
well, I mean, because I went one in the work ontology direction, but then I also was like, also, we're not hiring anyone until you can show me you haven't tried to automate this. So like, it's kind of like we got to live and breathe, right? What we're
Right.
doing.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And a lot of
Keep
our
keep
learnings
leaning,
comes
keep leaning
from,
on AI, keep leaning on,
yeah, well, it's the
new,
learnings.
be curious. Yeah, be curious about, how we can do this better, how we can do this faster, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where most of my learnings are coming from real life
Right.
practice.
Yeah,
You
because
know, like I'm not
the
a consultant
yeah,
standing around selling
right.
services of like, here's hey, theory, or like researchers. There's so many researchers out right now saying to the world, this is what you should do. They do this in a lab, people. They're not doing it in real life. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, this is not reality. This is not what
Right.
happens, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so theoretical. And then, historically, the way to grow in a software company in the past has been add headcount, right? Add more people, add more developers, add this, add that. And that is not the way of the future. And that's not the way that the best culture AI startups are beginning. They're beginning with more of a mindset of how can we do the most with what we have, and how can we
Yeah.
learn and grow, and that, that sounds a little bit scary because that's less headcount. But when you kind of start to scale that across solving multiple different problems in multiple different spaces, there's plenty of work for everyone. But it does require a different way of thinking about running a company.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the one beautiful thing about like that whole experience as well is like when you do that, suddenly you unlock capital in the business so you can reallocate budget. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of companies right now are, it's not necessarily just about cutting costs, it's about reallocating budget to feed into other things. I was able to do that. Things that we would never have been able to do, people that we would never typically be able to hire at our stage, we were able to do because we had been through the hard kind of bumpy moment of like, and now we're in this groove where people, my team just expect it now. Like if you're putting up a hire request, like you got to show me. You got to
Yeah.
show me that you have tried. And we've been doing that for what, 18 months now at least.
Hmm.
And I think that's where I think the empathy and like the not building in a lab, but building in real life and building in public. was what we kind of started to do without even realizing it. We were building in public and telling people, hey, like this works, this doesn't work. Or by the way, I built all these agents for, doing outbound, and it was really great for 3 months. And then we completely crashed our outbounding system because people were just like we were getting nothing back. So you got to pull back in the humans. It's like this whole thing of like, it's just like a learning curve, right? Like, which no one really kind of you don't get that unless you try, because it's all experimentation. So looking ahead, what is one thing that you hope every HR and every product leader gets serious about in 2025 if they want to stay relevant in an AI native sort of world of work? What does that look like?
So I think it's really easy for HR folks and really anyone to see the onslaught of AI marketing as hype, right? And to treat AI as like a bell and whistle, So should we use AI to write our job descriptions, right? Um, but that is not what what is actually happening, and that's what people need to kind of get past. It's not an add-on that you can ignore and then get back to regular business, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are an HR leader, if you are a business leader, if you are a product leader, whatever kind of leader you are, worth your salt, you need to recognize that it is a work disruptor, it's a people disruptor, it's a workforce disruptor, and of course it's an opportunity. So it's a tremendous opportunity. So you need to get serious about how people are going to be affected, both good and bad, and then really get in front of it to shepherd the absolute best result. So
Mm-hmm.
be a proponent of understanding what the work is. Be a
Mm-hmm.
proponent of understanding what AI tools can be used to make that work more efficient, to amplify people's work with AI. All of the different things, and what ultimately what that is going to mean in terms of the workforce you are building.
Yep.
And if you're not doing
Amen.
that, if you're still thinking that it's a side distraction, you're missing the point.
Yep. Amy, this is incredible. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your just openness to like kind of speak about the things that you've learned and give some of your expertise over for everyone. We'll link some of your resources in the channel for folks as well, and we'll make sure. But Amy, thank you so much. And
It's
thanks everyone for
Yeah.
joining as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And let's go
Great to
do this,
chat.
Amy.
Thanks so much. All righty.
Bye.
Bye.